The silver sequins glittering in the shadows looked like shattered glass scattered across a crime scene. And Kienogun didn't tolerate broken things in his territory. Not his lounge, not his reputation, and sure as hell, not the trembling woman folded beneath his table like a discarded secret someone had tried to bury alive. The Red Dragon Lounge pulsed with bass-heavy music that made the crystal chandeliers shiver. Neon blues and purples sliced through cigar smoke, painting everything in the colors of bruised skin. Cayeno had been reviewing shipping manifests when his second-in-command leaned in, whispering about a disturbance near the VIP section. A woman, running, hiding, in his club. He'd risen from his seat with the slow, predatory grace of a man who'd never had to rush toward violence. It always waited for him. His polished Italian leather shoes made no sound against the marble as he approached his private table, the one with the red velvet cloth that cost more than most people's cars. The one no one touched without permission. Someone was underneath it. Cayeno crouched, his tailored black suit pulling tight across his shoulders. The geometric tattoos crawling up his throat, each line a battle survived. Each angle a body buried seemed to writhe in the shifting club lights. His fingers grasped the golden tassels of the velvet cloth. He lifted it slowly. A woman stared back at him, curled into herself like a child hiding from monsters. But she wasn't a child. She was stunning, even with mascara tracking down her cheeks, even with her lip gloss smeared, even with her entire body shaking so violently her dress made a sound like rain against pavement. Her silver, sequined dress caught the light, making her look like a fallen star someone had tried to crush underfoot. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Her eyes, dark, wide, drowning in terror, locked onto his. She whispered something, her voice barely audible over the music. "I'm sorry. I got lost. I'll leave. Please. I'm sorry." Already trying to make herself smaller. Already apologizing for existing. Cayeno's jaw tightened. Then he saw them. The bruises. Finger-shaped shadows wrapped around both her wrists like ugly jewelry. Fresh, purple-black. The kind that came from someone grabbing her hard enough to leave their signature in her skin. His eyes traveled back to her face. Traced the slight swelling on her left cheekbone hidden beneath makeup. Noted the way she held her ribs when she breathed. Something cold and surgical clicked into place in Cayeno's chest, the same feeling he got right before he gave an order that would end someone's bloodline. "Who?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Not gentle. Precise. The way a surgeon asks where it hurts right before he cuts. She shook her head frantically, tears spilling faster. "No one. I fell. I'm clumsy. I should go." "You're not going anywhere." The words came out before he'd consciously made the decision. But that was the thing about Kienogun, he didn't second-guess himself. His instincts had kept him alive in a world where hesitation meant a bullet in the brain. Footsteps. Heavy. Approaching fast. Cayeno didn't drop the tablecloth. Didn't move his eyes from hers. He simply shifted, placing himself between her and whoever was coming. His hand settled on her bare shoulder, warm skin, cold tremors. She flinched like she'd been struck. He didn't remove his hand. He pressed down slightly. An anchor. A claim. A promise. "Stay quiet," he murmured. "Cayeno-gun." A voice cut through the music, sharp with entitlement. American accent. Expensive but tasteless. "I believe you have something of mine." Cayeno rose slowly, letting the red velvet fall back into place, but not all the way. Just enough to shield her from direct view while keeping his hand on her shoulder. His eyes lifted to meet the man standing 5 feet away, flanked by 2 private security guards who clearly had no idea they'd just walked into a death trap. The man was tall, polished, wearing a designer suit that screamed new money and political connections. His face was red from alcohol or rage, maybe both. His eyes were searching, predatory, familiar with taking what they wanted. "You're something?" Cayeno's voice was soft, conversational, the tone he used right before someone disappeared. His fingers flexed slightly on the woman's shoulder beneath the table, feeling her entire body lock up in recognition. Interesting choice of words. "My girlfriend." the man said, taking a step forward. His guards moved with him. Kaino's own men materialized from the shadows, 6 of them, forming a semicircle. She's unwell. Confused. I need to take her home. She's not confused. Kaino's thumb traced a small circle against her skin, feeling the violent tremor that ran through her at the word girlfriend. And she's not yours. The man's face darkened. Listen, I don't know who you think you are. You don't know. Kaino smiled then, the expression sharp enough to draw blood. He took 1 step forward, and the temperature in the space seemed to drop 10 degrees. Then allow me to educate you. My name is Kienogun. This is my club. That booth is my table. And that woman, he paused, letting the geometric tattoos on his throat catch the light, letting this fool understand exactly what those markings meant in Soul's underworld, is under my protection now. You can't just... I can. 2 words. Absolute. Final. I do. I am. Beneath the table, he felt her breath catch. Felt the moment her terror shifted into something else, confusion, maybe disbelief. But still, she stayed quiet. Smart girl. The ex-boyfriend's face contorted with rage and something uglier, the expression of a man who'd never been told no in his life. Do you have any idea who I am? What I can do to you? 1 phone call and this place is swarming with... With who? Kaino interrupted, his tone almost bored. Police? Politicians? You think I don't own them too? He tilted his head slightly, studying the man like an insect he was deciding whether to crush or burn. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of my club. You're going to forget you ever knew her. And if I ever see you near her again, I'll make sure the only place you're walking is the bottom of the Han River with concrete shoes. The silence that followed was suffocating. The ex opened his mouth, closed it. His eyes darted to his guards, who were visibly sweating despite the club's air conditioning. They'd recognized the tattoos. They knew. This isn't over, the man finally spat. Yes, Kaino said quietly. It is. He didn't watch the man leave. Didn't need to. His men would make sure the message was delivered along with a detailed list of what happened to people who ignored Kaino Gion's warnings. Instead, he waited until the footsteps faded, until the music swelled back to normal volume, until he felt her breathing begin to slow beneath his palm. Then he crouched again, lifting the velvet completely this time. Light flooded her hiding place. She stared up at him, mascara streaked and beautiful and utterly bewildered. What? Her voice cracked. What did you just do? Kaino extended his hand, the same hand decorated with scars and tattoos that told stories of violence. She stared at it like it might bite her. I made a decision, he said simply. The moment I saw those bruises. His eyes dropped to her wrists again, and his expression went cold. Surgical. Whatever bastard put his hands on you just became my problem to erase. She didn't take his hand. Not yet. She searched his face, looking for the trap, the ulterior motive, the next cage. Why? She whispered. Kaino's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Because in my world, miss. Melinda, she breathed. Melinda Brown. In my world, Melinda Brown, broken things get fixed or eliminated. And you. His eyes traveled over her again, slower this time, cataloging every injury, every sign of abuse, every tremor. Don't look like something that should be eliminated. He kept his hand extended. Patient. Immovable. After a long moment, long enough for her to understand this was a choice, not a command, she placed her shaking fingers in his palm. His hand closed around hers. Warm, steady, possessive. Welcome to the Red Dragon, Kaino murmured, pulling her gently out from under the table and into the light. Into his world, into his protection. You're safe now. The geometric tattoos on his throat seemed to pulse with promise, or threat, depending on who you were. Before we continue this story and discover what happens when Kaino takes Melinda to his penthouse and what deadly secret she's unknowingly carrying, that will ignite a war in Seoul's underworld, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from around the world. It truly means a lot to me seeing our storytelling community growing. Every subscription, every comment, every share helps us bring more dangerous romances, more powerful characters, and more unforgettable stories to life. Together. Now, let's see what Kayano does next. The gala had been suffocating even before Marcus cornered her in the corridor. Melinda had worn the silver sequin dress because he'd bought it for her because saying no meant consequences she'd learned to avoid. She'd smiled through dinner, laughed at the right moments, played the role of the perfect girlfriend to Seoul's rising political star. An American expatriate who'd made all the right connections, Marcus Whitmore was being groomed for an ambassadorship. Maybe more. He collected beautiful things. Art, cars, women. Melinda had been his favorite acquisition for 18 months. Until tonight, when she'd finally said the word that men like Marcus never accepted. No. It had started with his hand on her arm during the charity auction too tight, fingers digging in when she tried to pull away, then the whispered threat against her ear. Smile, or I'll make sure everyone here knows what a ungrateful little. She'd jerked away instinctively, and his champagne flute had shattered against the marble floor. The room had gone silent. Marcus had laughed it off, charming and smooth, blaming her clumsiness. But his eyes had promised violence. Real violence. The kind that left more than bruises. So Melinda had run. Through the ballroom, past shocked donors in their $1,000 gowns, down a service corridor that led to the exclusive nightclub section of the Grand Joseon Hotel, the Red Dragon Lounge. She'd heard Marcus and his colleagues mention it, a place where Seoul's elite went to conduct business that couldn't happen in daylight. She'd burst through the velvet curtains into a world of blue neon and cigar smoke, her heels clicking frantically against marble, her breath coming in panicked gasps. Behind her, she heard Marcus shouting her name, heard his security detail radioing each other. The VIP section loomed ahead, roped off, guarded, forbidden. She didn't care. She ducked under the rope, ignored the startled shout from a hostess, and dove beneath the nearest table. The red velvet tablecloth swallowed her in darkness just as Marcus's voice echoed through the club. Melinda, stop being dramatic and come out here. Now. She pressed her hands over her mouth to muffle her breathing. Her knees scraped against something sharp on the floor, broken glass. Maybe, and she felt warm blood trickle down her shin. The silver sequins of her dress caught fragments of light filtering through the velvet, making soft, rattling sounds every time she trembled. Which was constantly. She couldn't stop shaking. Couldn't stop seeing Marcus's face when she'd pulled away. Couldn't stop feeling his fingers bruising her wrists. Couldn't stop remembering the last time she'd tried to leave him. The hospital had listed it as a fall down the stairs. She'd known better than to correct them. Footsteps approached the VIP section. Multiple sets. She curled tighter, making herself as small as possible, praying the darkness would keep her hidden long enough for Marcus to give up, to leave, to... The footsteps stopped, right next to her table. Melinda's heart hammered so violently she thought it might burst through her ribs. Through the gap between the tablecloth and the floor, she could see shoes. Expensive Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine. Not Marcus's shoes. These were different. Still, patient, waiting. The music seemed to fade. Or maybe her hearing was going, tunneling down to just the sound of her own ragged breathing and the blood rushing in her ears. Then the tablecloth lifted. Light flooded in, blinding after the darkness. Melinda looked up and forgot how to breathe. The man crouching before her was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, all sharp angles and controlled danger. His face was angular, high cheekbones casting shadows in the neon glow, his eyes dark and assessing. Jet black hair swept back in a severe style that suggested military discipline. He wore a black suit that fit like it had been tailored to his body by someone who understood that clothes were armor. But it was his throat that made her blood run cold. Geometric tattoos covered every inch of his neck, intricate patterns that looked like sacred symbols or warnings or both. The black ink seemed to pulse in the shifting club lights, crawling up from beneath his collar to just below his jaw. In Seoul's underworld, tattoos like that meant one thing: Yakuza. Or the Korean equivalent. Someone so deeply entrenched in organized crime that they'd marked their body with permanent declarations of allegiance. Melinda had just hidden under a gangster's table. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I got lost. I'll leave. Please, I'm sorry." His eyes dropped to her wrists. She saw the moment he registered the bruises, dark purple-black fingerprints wrapped around both arms like handcuffs. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Something cold and surgical and absolutely terrifying. "Who?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the music. Not gentle, precise. "No one. I fell. I'm clumsy. I should go." "You're not going anywhere." Before Melinda could process that statement, she heard Marcus's voice cutting through the club noise, sharp with barely contained rage. "Kayano-gyun, I believe you have something of mine." The man, Kayano-gyun, apparently rose slowly without dropping the tablecloth completely. His hand settled on Melinda's bare shoulder, and she flinched violently. He didn't remove it, just pressed down slightly, warm and heavy and strangely anchoring. "Stay quiet," he murmured. Melinda watched through the gap in the velvet as Kayano straightened to his full height. She could only see from the waist down now Kayano's perfectly tailored trousers, Marcus's designer suit pants, the boots of what must be Marcus's security team. "You're something?" Kayano's voice was soft, conversational, and somehow more frightening than if he'd shouted. Interesting choice of words. "My girlfriend." Marcus's tone dripped with entitlement. "She's unwell. Confused. I need to take her home." The hand on Melinda's shoulder flexed slightly. "She's not confused," Kayano said. His thumb traced a small circle against her skin, whether to comfort her or claim her. She couldn't tell. "And she's not yours. Listen, I don't know who you think you are." "You don't know?" A pause. "Then allow me to educate you. My name is Kayano-gun. This is my club. That booth is my table. And that woman is under my protection now." Melinda's breath caught. Protection. The word should have been comforting. Instead, it sounded like a life sentence. "You can't just—" Marcus started. "I can. I do. I am." The absolute certainty in those words made something in Melinda's chest twist. She'd spent 18 months with a man who'd treated her like property, who'd isolated her from friends and family, who'd convinced her that leaving was impossible. And now this stranger, this dangerous, tattooed stranger was claiming her like she was a prize to be won. She'd just traded one cage for another. The confrontation above her escalated quickly. Marcus made threats about phone calls and political connections and consequences. Kayano responded with the kind of quiet menace that suggested he'd buried people for less. Finally, she heard Marcus's retreating footsteps, followed by a string of muffled curses as he was apparently escorted out by Kayano's security. Silence fell, heavy and expectant. Then Kayano crouched again, lifting the velvet completely this time. His eyes found hers. "What did you just do?" Melinda whispered. "I made a decision." He extended his hand, scarred knuckles, tattoos creeping down from his sleeve. "The moment I saw those bruises, whatever bastard put his hands on you just became my problem to erase." Melinda stared at his hand, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to refuse, to find another way out. But Marcus was still in the building. Marcus had security. Marcus had connections that could make her disappear without a trace. This man, this gangster, had just faced down Marcus without flinching. Slowly, her fingers touched his palm. His hand closed around hers immediately, warm and steady and far too possessive for someone she'd met 3 minutes ago. "Welcome to the Red Dragon," Kayano said, pulling her gently from beneath the table. "You're safe now." The geometric tattoos on his throat seemed to pulse with the promise. Melinda didn't feel safe. She felt like she'd just jumped from a burning building into an ocean full of sharks. but at least sharks were predictable in their violence. Cayeno moved through the club with the confidence of a man who owned not just the building but everyone in it. His hand remained on Melinda's lower back, not guiding, claiming as he steered her away from the main floor toward a private corridor she hadn't noticed before. 6 men in black suits materialized from the shadows, forming a protective diamond around them. Melinda's heels clicked against marble, the sound hollow and final. Her dress left a faint trail of silver glitter on the floor, like breadcrumbs she'd never be able to follow back to her old life. "Where are we going?" Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "Somewhere you can breathe," Cayeno said without looking at her. They emerged into a private elevator bay, all black marble and gold fixtures. Cayeno pressed his thumb to a biometric scanner, and the doors whispered open. He gestured for her to enter first. Melinda hesitated. The elevator looked like a gilded cage. "You're thinking about running," Cayeno observed, his tone neutral. "Don't. Your ex is currently being detained by hotel security for causing a disturbance. He's making calls. Within the hour, this building will be swarming with people looking for you. The only safe place right now is with me." "Safe." The word tasted bitter. "You're a gangster." "Yes. No denial, no prettying it up. Just cold fact. But I'm a gangster who keeps my word, and I told you that you're under my protection. That means something in my world." "What does it mean?" Melinda asked, even as her feet carried her into the elevator against her better judgment. Cayeno followed, his guards remaining behind as the doors closed. The space suddenly felt impossibly small with just the two of them. "It means no one touches you without my permission," he said, pressing the button for the penthouse. "It means you sleep safely. It means when you're ready to tell me who did this to, you really did this, I'll handle it." The elevator began its smooth ascent, and Melinda's stomach dropped. "You already know who did it. Marcus. You just sent him away." "I sent away a man who thinks he owns you. But these—" Cayeno's fingers ghosted over the bruises on her wrist without actually touching them. "Are at least 3 days old. The swelling on your cheek is older. This didn't start tonight, Melinda." Hearing her name in his mouth felt intimate, dangerous. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how little her dress covered, how vulnerable she was in this confined space with a man who'd just claimed her like territory. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse that stole what little breath Melinda had left. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Seoul's glittering skyline, the Han River snaking through the city like a vein of liquid diamonds. The space was all clean lines and expensive minimalism, black leather, steel, glass, art that probably cost more than her college education hung on the walls. But it was the details that caught her attention. The reinforced door, the security camera in every corner, the panic button by the entrance. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. "Guest room is down that hall," Cayeno said, shrugging out of his suit jacket and draping it over a chair. The movement revealed a shoulder holster, the gun sitting against his ribs like a natural extension of his body. "Bathroom is stocked. Take whatever you need." Melinda stood frozen in the middle of his living room, still clutching her small, silver clutch purse like a lifeline. "You're not going to. I mean, what do you want from me?" Cayeno paused in the act of pouring himself a drink whiskey, neat, in a crystal glass that caught the city lights. He turned to face her fully, and the weight of his attention was crushing. "Right now, I want you to stop shaking. I want you to shower, change into something comfortable, and eat something." He took a slow sip of his drink. "Then I want you to tell me everything about Marcus Whitmore so I know exactly who I just declared war on." "War?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "You think he's going to accept what happened downstairs? Men like that don't accept losses. They escalate." Cayeno's eyes traveled over her again, clinical and assessing. "He'll come for you. When he does, I need to know everything: who his allies are, what leverage he has, why he's so desperate to get you back." Because Melinda knew something. Or had something. Cayeno was smart enough to recognize that Marcus's reaction hadn't been about a wounded ego. It had been about fear. I don't know anything, Melinda said quickly. Too quickly. I'm just his girlfriend. I don't know about his work or his... Don't lie to me. The command was soft but absolute. I just put my organization at risk for you. You owe me honesty at minimum. Melinda's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. I don't owe you anything. You made a choice. That's not my fault. Something flickered across Kaino's face, surprise, maybe, or approval. You're right. I did make a choice. But so did you when you took my hand. So now we're both in this, and lying helps neither of us. He set down his glass and moved closer, not crowding her, but close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I'm not Marcus. I won't hurt you for telling the truth, but I will remove obstacles that threaten you. To do that, I need information. Why? Melinda's voice cracked. Why do you care? You don't know me. I'm nothing to you. You're something now, Kaino said simply. The moment I put my hand on your shoulder and told him no, you became mine to protect. In my world, that's not a temporary commitment. Your world is insane. Yes, but it's honest. He stepped back, giving her space. Guest room. Shower. Food. We'll talk after you've had time to process. You're safe here, Melinda. Whatever else I am, I keep my promises. Melinda wanted to argue, wanted to demand he take her to a police station or the American embassy or anywhere that wasn't a crime lord's penthouse. But exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her knees were still bleeding. Her dress was ruined. Her entire life had imploded in the span of 30 minutes. Okay, she whispered. Kaino nodded once, then returned to his whiskey and the windows, presenting his back to her in a gesture that was probably meant to be reassuring. Look, his posture said, I'm not even watching you. But Melinda had learned that the most dangerous men were the ones who didn't need to watch. They already knew you couldn't escape. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment had been. A massive bed dominated the space, made up in charcoal linens that looked obscenely expensive. The attached bathroom was all white marble and chrome, with a shower that could fit 4 people and a tub deep enough to drown in. Melinda locked the door behind her, though she suspected the lock would mean nothing if Kaino decided to come in and finally let herself fall apart. She slid down the door until she was sitting on the cold tile, her silver dress pooling around her like melted metal. The tears came in silent, shaking sobs that hurt her ribs. She pressed her fist against her mouth to keep quiet, muscle memory from all the times Marcus had punished her for crying too loud. Marcus. God. Marcus was going to kill her. He'd told her once, during one of his rages, that if she ever embarrassed him publicly, he'd make sure no one ever found her body. She'd believed him. Still believed him. And now she'd done worse than embarrass him. She'd been claimed by someone Marcus clearly feared. Melinda forced herself to breathe through the panic attack. 1 breath, 2, 3. She couldn't fall apart. Not yet. She had to think, had to figure out how to survive this nightmare. Her eyes fell on her clutch purse, abandoned on the floor next to her. She'd grabbed it when she'd fled the gala, instinct making her snatch it from the table even as Marcus was shouting. Now she opened it with trembling hands, inventorying her pathetic collection of survival tools. A lipstick, her phone, 5 missed calls from Marcus, 15 texts she didn't want to read, her hotel room key, and her jewelry box. Except it wasn't her jewelry box. Melinda pulled out the small rectangular case, confusion cutting through her panic. Her jewelry box was rose gold with her initials engraved on it. This was black, sleek, and when she opened it, there were no earrings inside. There was a USB drive. Her blood turned to ice. She'd grabbed the wrong case. In her panic to escape, she'd snatched this from Marcus's study table instead of her own belongings. She'd been in his study before dinner, looking for an aspirin in his desk drawer when he'd snapped at her to get out. She'd seen this case on his desk, right next to her jewelry box. Oh God. Oh God. Melinda's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the USB drive. This was why Marcus had chased her. Not because she'd run. Not because she'd embarrassed him. Because she'd accidentally stolen something he needed. Something important enough to risk exposing himself as a violent psychopath in front of Seoul's elite. She should throw it away. Flush it down the toilet. Pretend she'd never seen it. But even as the thought formed, she knew better. Marcus would never stop looking for this. And if he found her without it, he'd assume she'd copied it, or sold it, or done something with the information. She needed to know what was on it. Needed to understand what kind of danger she was in. Melinda stood on shaking legs and approached the bathroom counter. Her reflection in the mirror was shocking, mascara streaks cutting through expensive makeup. Her lips slightly swollen where she'd bitten it during the confrontation, bruises blooming on her arms like ugly flowers. She looked like a victim. She was so tired of being a victim. The shower ran hot enough to hurt, and Melinda stood under the spray until her skin turned pink. She found unopened toiletries in the cabinet, luxury brands, women's products, as if Kaino kept his guest room stocked for female visitors. The thought made her stomach twist with an emotion she didn't want to examine. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel that cost more than her rent, she found clothes laid out on the bed. Not her ruined dress, someone had removed that while she'd been in the shower. Instead, there was a black t-shirt that would hang to her knees and soft cotton pants with a drawstring waist. No note, no explanation, just clothes and the faint scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. Kaino had been in here while she showered, had seen her dress on the floor, had left clothes and then disappeared like a ghost. The violation should have terrified her. Instead, it just made her tired. Melinda dressed in his clothes, and they were clearly his, the shirt swimming on her smaller frame, and forced herself to face the rest of the penthouse. She found Kaino in the kitchen, of all places, making something that smelled like ginger and garlic. He glanced up when she entered, his eyes doing a quick scan of her appearance before returning to the pan in front of him. Sit. Not a request. Melinda sat at the kitchen island, watching as this tattooed crime lord moved around his kitchen with surprising competence. You cook, she said, because the observation was so absurd it needed to be voiced. I have many talents. He plated something that looked like japchae Korean glass noodles with vegetables and beef, set it in front of her with chopsticks and a glass of water. Eat. Melinda stared at the food. Her stomach growled traitorously. It's not poisoned, Kaino said dryly, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. Though I understand the paranoia. I'm not paranoid. I'm practical. But she picked up the chopsticks anyway, because she couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten, and because her body needed fuel even if her mind was screaming danger. The food was delicious. Perfectly seasoned. The noodles, the right texture, the vegetables still crisp. Melinda ate mechanically, aware of Kaino watching her with those dark, assessing eyes. Your knees, he said after a moment. Melinda looked down. She'd forgotten about the cuts from the glass under his table. They'd stopped bleeding in the shower, but they were still raw. First aid kit is in the cabinet behind you, Kaino continued, or I can tend to them. The offer was strange and intimate and terrifying. Melinda thought about Marcus, who'd once dislocated her shoulder and then spent 3 hours explaining why it was her fault. The contrast made her dizzy. I can do it myself, she said. I'm sure you can. But you're left-handed and the right knee is worse. Let me... How did he know she was left-handed? Melinda realized he'd been watching her eat, cataloging details, building a profile, the observation skills of a predator. Before she could argue, Kaino moved to the cabinet and retrieved a first aid kit that looked military grade. He pulled out a stool and sat in front of her, gesturing for her to extend her leg. Melinda hesitated. I'm not going to hurt you, Kaino said, and for the first time there was something almost gentle in his voice. I'm just going to clean and bandage, that's all. Against every instinct, Melinda extended her right leg. Keanu's hands were careful as they steadied her calf, his touch clinical and efficient. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic, the sting making her hiss, but he didn't rush, just worked with steady precision, applying antibiotic ointment and gauze. Tell me about Marcus, he said as he worked. And somehow, with his hands gentle on her injured skin. With food in her stomach and distance from the terror of the gala, Melinda found herself talking. She told him about meeting Marcus at an art gallery 18 months ago. How charming he'd been, how attentive, how quickly charm had turned to control. The first time he'd grabbed her too hard during an argument. The first time he'd hit her and then apologized with flowers and promises. How he'd convinced her to quit her job, isolated her from friends, made her dependent on him for everything. He's a political consultant, she heard herself saying. Works with high-level government officials in Seoul and Washington. He's being groomed for something bigger, maybe an ambassadorship. He has connections everywhere. Police, politicians, business leaders. Kaino's hands stilled on her knee. What kind of consulting? I don't know exactly. He never discussed work with me, but he met with a lot of powerful people. And he was paranoid about security encrypted phones, locked study, never left his computer unattended. But you were in his study tonight. It wasn't a question. Melinda swallowed hard. I was looking for aspirin. He got angry and told me to leave. And you grabbed something. Her breath caught. How did he? Kaino's eyes lifted to hers, dark and knowing. You had your clutch when you ran into my club. Marcus's men were searching for something specific, not just chasing a fleeing girlfriend. And you've been clutching that purse like it contains state secrets. He leaned back slightly. What's in it, Melinda? This was the moment. The decision point. She could lie, and he'd probably know. She could tell the truth, and she'd be admitting she'd stolen something from a dangerous man. Or she could do what every instinct told her to do and run. Except she had nowhere to run to. I don't know, she finally whispered. But I think I accidentally took something of his. Something important. Kaino finished bandaging her knee, his movements unhurried. Then he held out his hand, palm up, waiting. Melinda retrieved her clutch from where she'd left it in the guest room, her heart pounding so hard she felt sick. When she returned, Kaino was still sitting there, patient as a statue. She placed the USB drive in his hand. He examined it without expression, turning it over in his scarred fingers. You haven't looked at what's on it. No. Smart. He stood, moving to a laptop on the kitchen counter. Or cowardly. Hard to tell which. Does it matter? Melinda asked, feeling defensive and exhausted and scared. Kaino glanced at her, something that might have been sympathy flickering across his face. No. Either way, you made the right choice showing me. He plugged the USB drive into his laptop, and they both waited as the screen loaded. Melinda found herself holding her breath, wondering what kind of mistake she'd made, what kind of danger she'd brought into this stranger's home. The files opened, and Kaino went very, very still. What is it? Melinda asked when the silence stretched too long. State secrets. Kaino said softly, his voice devoid of emotion. Classified intelligence about Seoul's defense infrastructure, trade agreements, names of undercover operatives. His eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw something that might have been respect. Your ex isn't just a political consultant. He's selling information to the highest bidder. Oh God. Melinda's legs went weak. Oh God, Marcus is a traitor. Yes. Kaino closed the laptop with careful precision. And you just stole the evidence that could destroy him. The room tilted. Melinda grabbed the counter to steady herself. He's going to kill me. When he realizes I have this, he's not going to touch you. The certainty in Kaino's voice cut through her panic. Do you understand what you've just given me? This USB drive doesn't just prove your ex is corrupt. It shows he's working with people who are actively trying to destroy organizations like mine. He's not just your problem anymore, Melinda. He's mine. I don't want to be your problem, Melinda said, hating how her voice shook. I just want my life back. Your life was already gone the moment you ran from him, Kaino said, not unkindly. You can't go back, but you can go forward. He picked up the USB drive, holding it up to the light. This changes everything. You're not just a victim I'm protecting anymore. You're a partner. An asset. Maybe even... He paused, something calculating entering his expression. A queen who could stand beside a king. I don't want to be a queen. I want to be free. Freedom is an illusion, Kaino said. But power? Power is real. And right now, you're holding evidence that could bring down one of Seoul's rising political stars. That's power, Melinda. The question is whether you're brave enough to use it. Melinda stared at this man, this dangerous, tattooed stranger who'd inserted himself into her life like a blade between her ribs, and realized she was standing at a crossroads. She could beg him to take her to the embassy, to let her disappear, to give her back the USB drive so she could return it to Marcus and pray he showed mercy. Or she could stay. She could learn to wield the power he was offering. She could transform from the trembling girl under the table into something else. Something Marcus would never expect. The geometric tattoos on Keanu's throat seemed to pulse in the low light, a permanent reminder that some decisions couldn't be undone. Teach me, Melinda heard herself say. Teach me how to fight back. Keanu smiled then, sharp and approving and absolutely terrifying. Welcome to the war, Melinda Brown. Let's make sure you survive it. The first 3 days in Keanu's penthouse passed in a blur of tension and careful distance. Melinda slept in the guest room with the door locked, though she suspected the gesture was meaningless. Keanu moved through his domain like a ghost, present but untouchable, conducting business in his office while his guards rotated shifts in the hallway outside. She learned his patterns. Coffee at 5 a.m, black and scalding. Conference calls in Korean, Mandarin, and occasionally English, his voice never rising above conversational, even when discussing what sounded like murder. He cooked dinner every evening, always traditional Korean dishes that filled the penthouse with scents that reminded her she was far from home in every possible way. On the 4th morning, Melinda woke to find him standing on the balcony in nothing but black pants, his back to the sunrise. She'd intended to slip past to the kitchen, but the sight stopped her cold. His entire back was covered in tattoos. Not the geometric patterns on his throat, these were different. A massive dragon coiled from his left shoulder blade down to his lower back, its scales rendered in incredible detail, its eyes seeming to track her even from across the room. Cherry blossoms scattered across his right shoulder, some in full bloom, others falling like bloody rain, and between them, woven through the artwork, were scars. Bullet wounds, knife marks, the puckered tissue of burns. Keanu turned his head slightly, acknowledging her presence without surprise. You're up early. I couldn't sleep. Melinda wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware she was wearing his shirt again, her legs bare beneath the hem. Your tattoos. They're excessive? A hint of dark humor colored his voice. Beautiful. Terrifying. Most beautiful things are. He turned fully to face her, and Melinda forced herself not to look away from his chest. More ink, more scars, more evidence of a life lived violently. Each one marks something. A battle. A betrayal. A promise kept or broken. Despite her better judgment, Melinda found herself moving closer to the balcony. The morning air was cool, Seoul stretching out below them like a kingdom waiting to be claimed or conquered. The dragon? She asked. My first kill. I was 16. Kaino's voice was matter-of-fact, discussing murder the way someone might discuss their first job. A rival gang member who'd tortured my mentor. I hunted him for 3 months. When I finally found him, I learned that revenge is just another kind of prison. The dragon reminds me that some cages are of our own making. Melinda's throat felt tight. The cherry blossoms? My sister. Something flickered across his face. There and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. She loved cherry blossom season. She died when I was 22. Caught in crossfire meant for me. I'm sorry. Don't be. I killed everyone responsible. That's what the petals falling represent, their blood. He moved to the railing, his hands gripping the metal. In my world, Melinda, everything has a price. Love, loyalty, protection. The tattoos are my ledger. A record of debts paid and owed. What do you owe me? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Kaino's eyes found hers, dark and fathomless. Nothing. You owe me nothing. I claimed you because I chose to, not because I expected payment. But you said I'm an asset now, that I have power. You do. The USB drive, the information, the fact that you survived Marcus long enough to escape all of that has value. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. But power isn't the same as debt. Power is a tool. What you choose to do with it determines who you become. Melinda thought about the girl who'd hidden under his table 4 days ago, shaking so hard her sequins rattled. That girl had been defined by her fear, by her helplessness. She didn't want to be that girl anymore. Teach me, she said. Not just about the USB drive or Marcus. Teach me how to protect myself, how to fight. Why? Because I'm tired of being afraid. Because you're right, I can't go back to who I was, so I need to become someone else, someone who doesn't hide under tables. Kaino watched her for a long moment, weighing something she couldn't name. Then he nodded once. Get dressed. We start in an hour. The shooting range was in the basement of Kaino's building, accessible only by private elevator and retinal scan. The space was professional-grade reinforced walls, multiple lanes, targets that could be programmed for different scenarios. 2 of Kaino's guards were already there, running drills with mechanical precision. Melinda felt absurdly out of place in borrowed workout clothes, her hands still soft from a life that hadn't required calluses. Kaino appeared beside her, a black case in his hands. He opened it to reveal a handgun that looked smaller than the one he carried, sleeker and somehow more elegant. Glock 43, he said, lifting it with the familiarity of a surgeon handling a scalpel. 9mm. Light enough for your frame. Reliable. Easy to conceal. He handed it to her, and the weight of it made her arms shake. I don't know if I can... You can. His voice was firm but not harsh. Fear is natural. But fear and inability aren't the same thing. He moved behind her, his body close enough that she could feel his heat, and guided her hands into position. Grip here. Dominant hand high on the backstrap, support hand filling the gap. Your hands should be one unit. His fingers adjusted hers, patient and methodical. Melinda tried to focus on the technical instruction and not on the fact that a man was touching her and she wasn't flinching away. That Kaino's proximity felt different than Marcus's had still dangerous, but protective rather than predatory. Stance? Kaino continued, using his foot to nudge hers apart. Shoulder width, slight bend in the knees. You're not trying to muscle the gun. You're becoming part of the weapon system. He stepped back, and Melinda immediately felt colder. Now breathe. Find your sight picture. Front sight, target, back sight. The front sight is your truth. Everything else is context. Melinda stared down the range at the paper target 20 feet away. The gun trembled in her hands. I can't. Yes, you can. Kaino's voice was closer to her ear now, low and steady. Marcus took a lot from you. Don't let him take your courage, too. Breathe in. Exhale halfway. Squeeze, don't pull the trigger on the pause between breaths. Melinda followed his instructions. Breathed. Found the pause. Squeezed. The gun kicked in her hands, the sound deafening even through the ear protection. The target remained untouched, her shot going wild to the right. Again, Kaino said. She shot again, and again, and again. By the 20th round, her hands had stopped shaking. By the 50th, she'd hit the target. By the 100th, she'd found the center mass. When the magazine finally emptied, Melinda lowered the gun with arms that burned from exertion. Sweat had plastered her hair to her neck. Her ears rang. Her hands would probably bruise. She'd never felt more powerful in her life. Good, Kaino said, and the simple approval sent warmth through her chest. Tomorrow we work on moving targets. Next week, close quarters combat. By the time I'm done with you, you'll be able to walk through fire and come out the other side holding matches. Melinda turned to face him, still holding the empty gun. "Why are you doing this?" "Really? Because you asked me to." "That's not a reason. People ask you for things all the time. You don't train them to kill." Kaino was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached out and touched the fading bruise on her wrist with one finger, barely a whisper of contact. "Because I see something in you that I recognize. You think you're weak because someone convinced you that you are. But I've seen real weakness, Melinda. Real weakness runs. Real weakness stays broken." His eyes met hers. "You didn't run from Marcus, you ran toward survival. You didn't stay broken, you asked to be rebuilt. That's not weakness. That's steel wrapped in skin." Something in Melinda's chest cracked open, and before she could think better of it, she reached up and traced one of the geometric tattoos on his throat. Kaino went completely still, his breath catching. "Thank you," she whispered. His hand came up to catch hers, pressing her palm flat against the ink. "You're welcome." They stood like that for a breath, two broken people holding each other's pieces, before Keanu stepped back and the professional distance returned. But something had shifted. Some wall had developed a crack. And Melinda wasn't sure if that made her safer or put her in more danger than Marcus ever had. The call came at 2 a.m, 6 days later. Melinda had been asleep in the guest room when she heard Kaino's raised voice the first time she'd heard him lose his controlled calm. She stumbled into the living room to find him on the phone, his face carved from stone, rage radiating off him in waves. "How many dead?" he asked in Korean, his tone deadly quiet now. A pause. "Burn it down. I want everything Marcus Whitmore owns turned to ash by morning. And find out who gave him the layout of the building." He ended the call and stood there, staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. "What happened?" Melinda asked, though part of her already knew. Kaino's eyes lifted to hers, and she took an involuntary step back at what she saw there. "Marcus bombed one of my clubs, the Dragon's Pearl in Gangnam. 12 dead. 23 injured. His knuckles were white where he gripped the phone. He sent a message with the bomb. 'Return what's mine, or I'll burn your empire down around you.'" Melinda's legs gave out. She sank onto the couch, horror washing over her in cold waves. 12 people. Oh God, this is my fault. Those people died because Marcus Whitmore is a psychopath who values his stolen secrets more than human life. Kaino was in front of her suddenly, crouching to her eye level. "This is not your fault. This is his choice, his escalation, his evil. You have to give me back to him." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Tell him you'll return me. I'll give him the USB drive and—" "No. Kaino, please. More people will die. Your people. I can't." "No." His hands framed her face, forcing her to look at him. "I don't negotiate with terrorists. I don't hand over people under my protection. And I sure as hell don't let men like Marcus win because they're willing to kill innocents." "Then what do we do?" Something dark and satisfied crossed Kaino's face. "We set a trap, and we make sure he never threatens anyone again." The plan was simple in the way that all terrible ideas were simple. Kaino would reach out to Marcus through intermediaries, offering a meeting, a trade Melinda and the USB drive for a ceasefire. Marcus would come because his political career, his life, everything he'd built depended on retrieving that evidence. And when he did, Kaino would end him. "You'll be bait," Kaino explained 2 days later as they reviewed the plan in his office. "But you'll be armed, you'll be trained, and you'll have 20 of my best men in position." Melinda stared at the blueprint of the meeting location, an abandoned warehouse near the docks, all industrial decay and shadows, the kind of place where people disappeared. "He'll kill me the moment he has the drive," she said quietly. "He'll try, but he won't succeed." Kaino's finger traced a path on the blueprint. "You'll have a tracker, body armor under your clothes, a weapon strapped to your thigh. And the drive you're handing him will be a fake. The real one is already somewhere Marcus can never reach it." "This is insane. This is survival." Keanu leaned back in his chair, watching her with those dark, assessing eyes. You asked me to teach you how to fight. This is the final lesson, Melinda. Theory becomes practice. Everything we've trained for comes down to this moment. What if I freeze? What if I'm still just the girl hiding under the table? You're not. You haven't been for days. He stood and moved around the desk, extending his hand. But if you want out, I'll find another way. I won't force you to do this. Melinda looked at his scarred hand, remembering the first time he'd offered it to her in that club. She'd taken it then out of desperation. But now she took it because she was choosing to stand rather than hide. I'm in, she said. Let's end this. Cayeno's grip tightened, and something that looked almost like pride flickered across his face. That's my queen. The words shouldn't have affected her, but they burned through her chest like brands, marking her as irrevocably as his tattoos marked him. The warehouse smelled like rust and standing water. Melinda's heels clicked against concrete as she walked into the cavernous space, her silver dress, the same one she'd worn the night she'd fled, glittering under the sparse industrial lighting. The body armor beneath it dug into her ribs. The gun strapped to her thigh felt heavier than it had during training. Marcus waited in the center of the space, flanked by 6 armed men who looked military-trained and expensive. He looked thinner than she remembered, his eyes hollow from lack of sleep. Desperation rolled off him in waves. Melinda. His voice was hoarse. Thank God. I've been so worried. Come here, baby. Let's go home. The endearment made her stomach turn. She stopped 20 feet away, her hands empty and visible. I have the drive. Good. Good girl. Marcus took a step forward, and his men moved with him. Hand it over and we can forget this whole ugly business. I'll even forgive you for running. For embarrassing me. Forgive me? The words came out sharper than she'd intended. You hit me, Marcus. You broke my ribs. You made me afraid to breathe wrong in my own home. His face twisted. You're being dramatic. We had some rough patches, but I loved you. I still love you. Now stop wasting time and give me the fucking drive. The mask slipped, and there he was. The real Marcus. The monster she'd lived with for 18 months. Melinda reached into her clutch and pulled out the USB drive. The fake one, identical to the original except for the tracking software Cayeno had loaded onto it. Here. She threw it, and Marcus lunged for it like a starving dog for meat. His hands closed around it, and relief washed over his features. Thank God, he breathed. Then his eyes lifted to hers, cold and calculating. Now, about loose ends. He pulled a gun from his jacket. Melinda's training kicked in before conscious thought. She dove behind a concrete pillar as the first shot rang out, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Return fire erupted from the shadows, Cayeno's men, positioned exactly where they'd planned. But Marcus's security team was good, military-grade good. The warehouse erupted into a firefight, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like lightning. Melinda! Cayeno's voice cut through the chaos, and she saw him across the warehouse, taking cover behind a rusted industrial container. Stay down! But Marcus had anticipated the trap, had brought more men than they'd expected. The fight was uglier, more desperate than planned. Melinda pressed her back against the pillar, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through the body armor. Her hand found the gun strapped to her thigh, the metal cold and solid. You stupid bitch! Marcus's voice, closer now. Did you really think you could hide from me? That your gangster boyfriend could protect you? She could hear his footsteps. Circling. Hunting. I gave you everything. Marcus continued, his voice echoing. A life. A purpose. I loved you. And you betrayed me. You stole from me. Melinda's hands shook as she checked the gun. 15 rounds. Safety off. Breathe. Come out, Melinda. Let's end this. I promise I'll make it quick. She closed her eyes, hearing Cayeno's voice from their training sessions. Fear is natural. But fear and inability aren't the same thing. You're steel wrapped in skin. Marcus rounded the pillar. Melinda raised the gun. Their eyes met, and she saw his shock, his disbelief that his victim was armed, that she would fight back. "You can't," Marcus said, already lowering his weapon slightly, confident in her weakness. "You're not a killer. You're just a scared little girl playing dress-up." "You're right," Melinda said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm not a killer." She pulled the trigger. The shot took him in the shoulder, exactly where Kaino had taught her to aim for a non-lethal but incapacitating hit. Marcus screamed, his gun clattering to the ground as he clutched the wound. "But I'm not scared anymore either." Marcus stared at her, blood seeping between his fingers, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. She wasn't his property, wasn't his victim, wasn't his anything. "You're insane," he gasped. "You'll never—" A single shot rang out, and Marcus's head snapped back. He crumpled to the ground, dead before he hit the concrete. Melinda spun to find Keanu lowering his weapon, his face spattered with blood that wasn't his own. The geometric tattoos on his throat stood out in sharp relief against his skin. "I told you," Keanu said quietly, moving toward her through the settling dust. "Some problems need to be erased." The warehouse had gone silent. Marcus's men were down or fleeing. Keanu's guards were securing the perimeter. And Melinda stood there, guns still raised, unable to look away from Marcus's body. She'd shot him, had wanted him dead, had felt satisfaction when Keanu's bullet had ended him. What did that make her? "Melinda." Keanu's hands were on her arms, gentle despite the violence coating them. "Look at me. Not him. Me." She forced her eyes to his face, searching for judgment and finding only understanding. "You survived," he said simply. "That's all that matters. You survived." Melinda's legs gave out, and Keanu caught her, pulling her against his chest as the adrenaline drained away and left her shaking. She pressed her face against his shirt, breathing in gunpowder and cologne and the scent of survival. "I shot him," she whispered. "Yes. I wanted him dead." "Yes. Does that make me like him?" Keanu pulled back just enough to look at her face, his expression fierce. "No. It makes you a survivor. Marcus hurt you for power, for control. You hurt him for freedom. Those aren't the same thing." Sirens wailed in the distance. Keanu's men were already moving, erasing evidence, securing the scene in ways that would ensure the official story bore little resemblance to reality. "We need to go," Keanu said. But he didn't release her, just tucked her against his side and led her toward the exit. The news broke the next morning. Marcus Whitmore, rising political consultant, found dead in an apparent confrontation with organized crime figures. The circumstances were murky, the investigation ongoing. But somehow, miraculously, a USB drive containing evidence of his treasonous activities surfaced and found its way to the appropriate authorities. Melinda watched the coverage from Keanu's penthouse, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm morning, coffee growing cold in her hands. Her face never appeared in any report. Her name was never mentioned. As far as the world knew, she'd never existed in Marcus's life. Keanu had erased her from the story completely. "Drink your coffee," he said, appearing with a fresh cup and taking away the cold one. "You need to eat something." "I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask if you were hungry. I said you need to eat." He set a plate of fruit and toast in front of her, then sat down on the opposite end of the couch. Close enough to reach, far enough to give her space. "You've been staring at that screen for 6 hours. They're making him sound like a hero, like he was murdered by criminals rather than killed by the man he'd beaten and terrorized for 18 months? Yes. Because the truth is messy and uncomfortable, and people prefer their villains obvious. Keanu picked up the remote and turned off the television. Marcus is dead. His network is being dismantled. The information he sold is being used to prevent the damage he caused. You're safe. That's what matters. Am I? Melinda finally looked at him. Really looked at him. Safe. I'm living with a crime lord. I just participated in a murder. I have blood on my hands. How is that safe? You have survival on your hands. There's a difference, Kaino leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. But you're right about one thing. You can't stay here indefinitely. I've made arrangements. Melinda's stomach dropped. Of course, she'd served her purpose, been useful during the crisis. Now she was a liability. You're sending me away. I'm giving you a choice. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and set it on the coffee table between them. Inside is a plane ticket to New York. First class. A new identity. Bank account with enough money to start over. A phone number you can call if you ever need help. Walk away, Melinda. Go build a life where men like me and Marcus don't exist. The envelope sat there like a serpent. Tempting. Terrifying. And if I don't want to leave? Something flickered in Kaino's eyes, surprise, hope. He shut it down so quickly she couldn't identify it. Then you stay. But understand what that means. This life, my life, is violent. Dangerous. You'll never be able to walk away from it completely. You'll be associated with me, protected by me, and targeted because of me. Is that what you want? For me to stay? What I want is irrelevant. This is your choice. But Melinda saw through him now, understood the man beneath the tattoos and the violence. Kaino had given her the tools to leave, had made it easy for her to disappear into a normal life. Because he was terrified she'd choose to stay. She picked up the envelope, felt the weight of freedom in her hands, thought about the girl she'd been 3 weeks ago, hiding under a table, defined by her fear. Then she stood and walked to the fireplace. Kaino watched silently as she held the envelope over the flames. Melinda, you asked me to be your queen, she said, not looking at him. You told me I was steel wrapped in skin. You taught me that power is real and freedom is an illusion. She let the envelope catch fire, watched it curl and blacken. So I'm choosing power. I'm choosing to stand beside you, not behind you. I'm choosing to be the queen you saw in me that first night. The envelope